We have an interesting story from the Hungarian foreign minister. He gave an interview on, I have no idea if I'm pronouncing this correctly, Mandiner, a Hungarian newspaper. And Remix here brought it in English for us, or rather a few chosen quotes. This is a very recent story from 2 hours ago. And he talks about how there was a peace treaty ready to sign between Ukraine and Russia before the war started. And due to interference from the West, it was scrapped. It was never signed. If this is true, this is, how to put it, one of the greatest injustices. Now, this allegation is not a new one. We have had rumors that interference from specifically the White House by way of Boris Johnson pressured Ukraine not to sign a peace treaty with Russia. But now we have a high-ranking government official from Hungary talking about it, and specifically saying that he himself, I quote here, "I saw the document that was almost signed, and which, according to the realities of the time, would have ended the war. What happened? The Westerners came and told the Ukrainians to keep fighting, no agreement should be accepted." I hope this wakes people up, because I am deeply mistrustful of all the Western governments right now. It doesn't matter if it's French, German, British, American, Canadian, Australian, it doesn't matter. Them and many others, in my opinion, are working against the best interests of their own populations, native populations specifically. And they're trying to pretend that they don't have a collective shared history, that they don't have a culture, that the country belongs to immigrants more, that the immigrants are, specifically illegal immigrants who just came in, are more moral and worthy than their own populations. They fight freedom of speech and to an extreme degree, and vehemently reject any criticism from their own people, but welcome any so-called criticism from the left, from the immigrants, that they're not doing enough against their own populations. They're not doing enough to grab more power. They're not doing enough to give their own friends in the media and the newly arrived migrants more money and more privileges. And this is not a state of affairs that is natural. I have never seen it happen until the last few years, or rather it was happening under the surface. Like, people were hiding it, they would deny it. If you caught them, then there would be some change, at the very least aesthetically, in order to appease the native populations. Now you are treated completely like an enemy, and they are, not for the first time, accused of, at the very least, mismanaging a potential disaster. I'm talking, of course, about how right now there are many accusations of mismanagement of the Helene hurricane. There was also the Palestine, not the one next to my country, the Palestine next to my country. I'm talking about the American Palestine, where they had a certain disaster, and due to government mismanagement, allegedly, a lot more people were harmed, and to a greater extent. At the very least, I've heard a lot of criticism on social media for the government's handling of that particular situation. And once again, it was in a rural Trump-supporting area. The idea that your own population, so long as they do not support you politically, is to be treated as enemies in a war is horrendous. And that is what the left is currently standing accused of by the right. You might say that the right is becoming extremist and lying, if you believe the establishment, but I think what we're seeing is a greater realignment, where those who are for the sort of incoming global order, the globalist establishment, and I'm talking here about the UN, the World Economic Forum, the EU for the most part, the governments and the establishments in most Western countries, they are on the side of the establishment. And then you have most of the populations of the West against, along with governments that are specifically more right-wing, and I'm not talking about performative like rhinos, I'm talking about populists, right? Like the Hungarian Prime Minister Orban, for example. But not just. You have Milei, Javier Milei was very much a populist in my opinion. I'm not sure if Le Pen would actually be a populist if elected, although she'd definitely be an improvement over Macron. I'm not sure about Nigel Farage either, honestly. The man is so milquetoast in some regards. I mean, his greatest strength is his ability to remain in opposition to the mainstream without being ousted, without being excommunicated. But it's also his greatest weakness. He can't go far enough to make a meaningful change, to garner support from the disaffected. And I think this limitation is becoming a fatal flaw for him. Regardless, back to the more topic of this particular article. This is a clip of the same foreign minister of Hungary. I can't read that name. Peter Szijjártó, maybe? I'm sorry if I mangled it. Regardless, this is in Hungarian, so I will be silencing it and reading the subtitles for us. Let's start. Our experience is clear. When Donald Trump was president of the United States, the political leg of Hungarian-American relations was at its peak. When Donald Trump was president, a strong American leader was able to prevent the emergence of armed conflicts in the world. Our 4 years of experience in working with Donald Trump show that if he had been president of the United States in recent years, there would be no war in our neighborhood now. Since Biden became president, the world has been beset by war. Hungarian Foreign Minister Peter Szijjártó hopefully believes Trump is the answer to the chaos. I think we can say that based on these experiences, we obviously want the world to be a peaceful place and for Hungarian-American relations to develop well in the coming period. The name of Donald Trump is synonymous with both peace and good Hungarian-American relations. Well, like I said, there's a global realignment, and the governments that are populist will want to have good relations with populist governments, and it's pretty much impossible for the opposite to happen. I know that for my country, Israel, we've had a long-standing alliance with America and the United States, and it has been bipartisan. Both here and abroad for the longest time. There were certain populations that supported us more or less, and of course in Israel too there are more and less pro-American populations, but on the whole in both countries I think the relations were very good. And what we're seeing now is that it is becoming, I think, more and more difficult to create the same kind of relationship when there's a misalignment. When we have a right-wing, it's not even a populist, it's just not a globalist government, right? It's not outright betraying the people, which is, in my opinion, what the globalists do. So that's enough to strain relations. And if you listen to Kamala Harris, she is very much avoiding talking about any sort of good relationship with our Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. She says that there's an alliance between the nation of Israel and America, and between the people. But essentially, I think she's making it quite clear that if Israel wants to have the backing of America continue to the same extent under her regime, then we might want to replace our prime minister. That's what I got from her speeches, her interviews. And this is not something that used to be normal for us. I think you'll see this realignment globally where there's going to be sort of different, how to put, alliances. It kind of reminds me of a video by the World Economic Forum about the possibilities for the future, where they hoped for a world where everyone accepted their vision for the future. But they feared the possibility of a multipolar world where different alliances vied for resources against each other, where basically some accepted the vision and some rejected it outright and fought against it, fought to maintain independence and essentially maintain the old way of doing things, the old social norms and economic norms. Because the globalist vision for the future does not include things like privacy. And even for private property, it is to be minimized, if not outright taken away from us under the World Economic Forum's vision. And you might say, well, who is the World Economic Forum? It's the biggest forum where all the rich and powerful converge every year. And you'll notice that a lot of the world leaders are students of theirs. Young global leaders are called people who essentially in the youth studied in the World Economic Forum institutions, received funding from them and so on. Justin Trudeau and supposedly half the entire government of Canada are young global leaders, and you can see that there have been a lot of other world leaders that are in the same way. What did Klaus Schwab say? He's the founder and chairman of the World Economic Forum. I think former chairman. He's sort of semi-retired, but not really. Oh yeah, he said that they penetrated the cabinet of many governments across the globe. Well, I think that's bad. I think that's suspicious. I do not trust him to be well-meaning. And in my opinion, the war in Ukraine is just another way for these people to show their intentions. You know that there is a huge rebuilding effort being prepared for, specifically by BlackRock. So BlackRock is one of, if not the largest corporations, asset managers in the world, and they are very much an engine of this new world order purported by the World Economic Forum. They push for DEI pretty much in every company you've ever been a customer of. And I'm talking, it doesn't matter if it's food, if it's clothes, if it's games, if it's movies, anything. They have a hand in it. They have some decent percentage ownership of. And they are supposed to rebuild Ukraine specifically to be a digital nation with digital ID and CBDCs, central bank, digital currencies, essentially no privacy, 15-minute cities. Every project that the globalists champion and that people on the populist side are very much leery of, suspicious of, because it will give the government more power, it will take away privacy, and it will make us subject to the whims of the government and the large corporations and banks. So if we do something or say something that they do not like, instead of just being banned from social media, you might find yourself in much more dire straits, like debanking, for example. If you remember the Nigel Farage case where he was debanked, essentially, told to, just take away his money and leave the bank he was doing business with. And they claimed that it was because it was no longer financially a good idea for them to hold him there. But then private, insider memos came out saying that they just gave excuses and they don't want him there because of politics. And this became a scandal. He was eventually able to, I believe, regain a bank account, but that's not universal. There have been less popular and notable figures that have faced similar problems, and for them it still persists. Can you imagine how difficult it is to live today without a bank account? Now make that 10, 100 times worse, because everything is bought with digital currency that you can only get in the bank and use through the bank. It will make any sort of disagreement with the powers that be, with the establishment, outright impossible. And this is the world that they are creating, in my opinion. The war with Russia is an engine for this transformation that they are attempting to bring about. Never let the crisis go to waste, And just thinking about the human cost of this war, and that it could very well have been prevented if only we had governments in the West that pushed for peace instead of against it. I mean, allegedly, obviously, we have to depend on the word of this foreign prime minister of Hungary, but he's not the first one to say it. And if we go here, you can see that, according to David Aramia, I hope he said it correctly, the leader of Ukraine's ruling party, Ukraine was ready to sign the document when Western leaders saw a draft of the negotiations. The Ukrainian politician said then British Prime Minister Boris Johnson allegedly worked hard to nix the potential peace agreement. So, this, like I said, this is not a new allegation. This is not the only source. I think there may well be fire, where there's smoke, there's fire. Of course, there's also the claim of white people being replaced. That was considered a conspiracy theory by the left, even though they themselves say the same thing. And when they say it between themselves in their own meetings, you can even watch videos of it, that it is being cheered on. Whether it is media personalities, I believe there's a video of Brian Stelter saying it. I think there's a video of, correct me if I'm wrong, Joe Biden saying it, that whites are becoming a minority in America, and that's a good thing. You can definitely find German politicians, specifically from the Green Party, I believe even the leader of the Green Party in Germany, saying it and celebrating it. And so I'm not going to say anything about my own opinions on the subject, just that the left has this dual coverage of it, where whenever it is being presented as a bad thing, then obviously it's a conspiracy theory, whereas whenever they say it themselves, they celebrate it. So here we have Prime Minister Orban saying, Europe's wars lead to fewer white Christian Europeans and more migrants. Hungary's leader says the war in Ukraine is a demographic disaster, just like World War I and World War II were for Hungary. Now migrants will be being used to fill the missing gaps. Make of that what you will. Regardless, thank you for watching, like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.